Alrighty, hello and good evening. Welcome to the CREEDCAST. It is Thursday, the 2nd of July. That means we're here to record your SQUADS preview show for round 17 upcoming at Adelaide Oval once again. A rare opportunity to have a couple home games in a row in the regular fixture outside of gather round festivities. But yes, this Sunday, the 5th of July, 4:10 p.m, closing out the AFL weekend. Sunday twilight, Adelaide Oval versus the North Melbourne Kangaroos. An intriguing match coming up for us, being it's a side we've faced already this year in vastly different circumstances, understandings of where we were at. Obviously, our round one clash against the Kangaroos was the start of the era, the Josh Carr era. We didn't know what to expect from this side this year, and so much water has gone under the bridge. A lot of water has gone under bridges and through businesses this week in South Australia, but I hope everyone's staying safe out there and haven't had to deal with too much damage. But a lot of water has gone under the proverbial bridge as far as football goes this year since the last time that we played the Kangaroos, and it provides a really, really intriguing opportunity for us to test where we're at against a side that we've seen before this year, in similar spot on the in development to us as well, and a lot of things to look at going into this weekend. But before that, Jamie, good evening, mate. Geez, it's been a fun week on the socials. The wake of the Showdown win for us and loss for the crosstown rivals. I started a rewatch of Ken Burns' Vietnam series today, and I was thinking as I saw the image of the helicopter on top of the the building in Saigon as the last Americans were getting their asses out of Vietnam before it fell. That I wonder when the last Crow fan will be on the last chopper out of Saigon in our comments this week. It's
good
been
evening
very, very
to you,
amusing.
and hello everyone joining us. Whether you be new, welcome, or existing, welcome as well. Welcome back. The socials have been popping off, as it were, this week, and like I mentioned, we are unflappable. So do your worst. That's an interesting question, though. I had half of mine to turn comments off at today, just to put a close to the downfall, the aftermath of Showdown. Because look, from our point of view, we do have to look forwards, even though we'll still be reveling in the Showdown victory for the rest of the year, of course, like we mentioned earlier in the week on the review show. So yeah, but it's like perpetual motion at the moment, because it seems that great week for followers. So again, if you're listening, thanks for jumping on board, but it just seems that new people are seeing content, any of the posts this week, putting their 2 cents worth, and then in equal measure, it seems to be attracting someone from the other side of Port Road who wants to have a whinge, and then new debates, we'll put it, tend to flare up, and old mates Dave and Jamie have to be hot on the hide and block buttons, just depending on where those discussions get to. But no, it's been fun for all the reasons that we already know about, and just the post-mortem for the Adelaide Crows, and just our victorious week. But alas, we do have a grudge match to look forward to, as we mentioned at the back end of that lengthy review. And again, thanks everyone for jumping on board. We've had some good feedback from the Showdown review. I'm sure everyone's been hanging out for a win, but to that degree, being a Showdown, we went a bit overtime. So I hope people have figured out the Spotify 1.25 times buttons and things like that to help you get along. But yeah, it's been a fun week.
Or even slow it down if you want to spend even more time in it, just bathing in it, staying in that bath of glory until you're all wrinkly and just enjoying every minute of it. No, look, as you said, we do have to move on, but we will revel in it and bring it up at times, because it's just one of those wins. You've got to enjoy the journey in football, and obviously with every year, not that we can win a premiership every year, and we're certainly not winning it this year, although, as Dwayne Russell was at lengths to say on the game day, we're still in a mathematical chance of finals. you've got to enjoy the journey between the years of premierships and whatever. So, that's one of those ones that you chalk up to a very, very enjoyable moment on the journey, just like the Bogue Bowl last year and many other games that we've had the opportunity to review in the last few years. But we do move on and head towards this weekend, as I said, Sunday afternoon against the Kangaroos. A few changes for Port Adelaide. Obviously, being a Thursday night, we're going into a Sunday game. These are extended squads, so we're gonna mention some ins without having too many outs. Although the Kangaroos have named an out with the ins and outs of theirs being a little bit larger, even with extended squads. But for us, Alex Van Wyk has been named for a debut, but he hasn't actually been. There's been no announcements yet from the club that he is making a debut. So I'm interested to see if he's actually just in the squad for. Or they're going to keep going with Vicentini and Jordan Sweet as kind of, well, obviously Jordan Sweet is out and out number one, but he is in the squad, and obviously with, you have to have that option if someone's a late withdrawal for any reason, you have to have, and clearly they want to go, it's probably a sign that they do want to play the two rucks in the game, it's just that he's there in case they need to make a late change. That would be how I read it, but I'll be interested to see your view. Jack Watkins is named in the extended squad. And Miles Bergman is named as well, which is probably the biggest one that is very, very likely to be back in, based on how they've written up the press release today as well, coming back from that toe ligament injury, one that is more common for ballerinas, as it was reported back when he did it. So just a weird one for him, but he's back in. I know a few people have mentioned that they possibly would have thought he'd come back through the sandful, but he hasn't spent, a few months out. It's been a month or 5 weeks, maybe. Was that right before the bye or?
It's a great question.
Game? I'm trying to think now,
it's
but
been a long time.
It hasn't been a super lengthy amount of time, and I'm certainly for Miles Bergman, the class that he brings, and him coming straight back in. If they think everything else is right and his body's, he's not making a comeback from a 12-month layoff or anything like that, so he's got a bit of semi-recent football game time in him. It makes sense for me to just bring him straight back in rather than going through the sandful, in my opinion. How are you feeling about the way it's been named?
After Saturday night's proceedings, they can do no wrong in my eyes because I am a sycophant. So, I believe it's Van Wyk as well, but up for someone.
I think that's how I pronounced it when I did the mid-season draft review as well. So I've just Van Dijk.
But seems like
apologies.
Seems like
but that's
you've made a good impression early doors after your mid-season draft selection type. We'll list you as an emergency come 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock Friday, whenever final teams are posted. Because I don't see him usurping Dante Vicentini after one game back in the side, unless there's something that they really like. Because I dare say, I'm not sure if it's been confirmed anywhere, but I'm fairly sure he has signed an 18-month contract, much the same as Xavier Bammer. So there's no rush to see what he's got. I have seen that opinion though, with the season that it is this year and just trying to find out what we've got on our list, maybe swapping Vicentini out. But again, after the game that we saw on Saturday night versus the Adelaide Football Club, it'd be a pretty harsh call to make to drop Viz anyway. Miles Bergman, the media manager or the social media manager, has listed on the field. And look, the track record for players being named on the field, and like you said, the press release, and I think it was Hamish Hartlett's press conference earlier in the week, all suggest that he will play and he's all good to go. Saying that he's that good of an athlete and he is quite meticulous with his body. He has been with his rehab, that a guy like that is one of those ones where you don't necessarily need to bring back through the SANFL. He's just in that good a shape outside of the injury, and he's been ticking all the boxes on the way back. So, Jack Watkins I expect to be emergency as well. The interesting thing, though, is I'm not 100% sure who Miles Bergman would come in for. because our defensive line is pretty sound. I didn't have any qualms with that unless there's something that I or we aren't privy to, which means they may drop, say, a Jacob Ware, who may be a bit unlucky because, as you know, I watched the full replay today of the showdown. And we did touch on Jacob Ware to an extent, and just, the whole defensive wing and him doing what the coaches are wanting. Also, it seems, with his regular selections this year. But I paid a bit closer attention, and he did actually contribute from a defensive point of view a lot more than I think even I probably paid credit to, even though that was one of the aspects that I was happy with, and that I could start to see in recent weeks since him being around the ones again. Whether it be spoiling, assisting in the air, plugging up space, like I said the other day, I did notice it a bit more now with another watch of that showdown. But unfortunately, when you've got a guy like Miles Bergman, and it sounds like he is going to come back and slot into that defensive mix, then a defensive wing in Jacob Ware is probably the more obvious, because outside of that, Jackson Mead is playing genuine mid, even though it's on low minutes. This now that he's come back into the side, and look, we didn't really speak about him, but I think he had, was it around 60% game time, or maybe a little bit more than that, and he still posted the 12 possessions, Jackson Mead. So you could be forgiven if you said, I didn't really see much of Jackson Mead on the night. It's because he was on the bench for a fair portion of it. And when he was on the field, he actually had a fairly decent impact. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting call. Mitch Zatto being a forward, do you drop him and shuffle the deck? That would, it would probably be an easy decision to make. But from a like-for-like point of view, it's not quite there. So I'm very intrigued to see who is the unfortunate one that gets dropped for Miles Bergman. But at the end of the day, Miles Bergman is absolutely part of our best 23, and you find a place for him.
Yeah. I'm of the opinion that it might be Ware, but I don't have any insight into who or why it would be that. I haven't had a chance to look at too much of the press and media from this week to see if they've said anything about their plans beyond Bergman coming back in. I just think you mentioned about Zatto. I mean, Zatto's probably the only other one, but then being that maybe a little bit more positionally different, Zatto's ability to get thrown up forward and just, as you said in the review of the showdown, just run through guys and put that forward pressure on and do some things that we want to play in the style that we want to. And, having another home game in front of the fans, obviously they're advertising, if you've got kids, bring them down. Under 14 gets in free during July, so bring them down for the game. There's a little bit of let's build off of this and have a couple of weeks of good football at home in front of the fans. You kind of want to stick to a similar ethos, particularly with North Melbourne being a team that is one of the highest disposal efficiency team in the country. One of the stories of our game from the first round was the fact that they used the ball at almost 80%. We were at 70%, and they had 100 more disposals of the ball. So we saw in that game that they had way more of the ball, possessed the ball well, and used it far better than us. We're going to want to bring a similar pressure game and to kind of disrupt what they're doing, as well as obviously try to mitigate those gaps. I don't think we'll be able to beat them in any of those areas based on the way the two teams play. But if we can mitigate those gaps and kind of bring the game a bit more into our style, that will be important. I think going in with a similar ethos is kind of the kind of one wood of what this team is currently, is based on its structure, obviously, that is built out through the year. It'll be really interesting, obviously, to see that structure as it's matured since round one go to work against North Melbourne, as well as just being able to mitigate those gaps and bring the pressure games in North Melbourne, being that they're off their home, obviously not in their home deck in this one either. there's a few areas we want to hit them hard in, and I think not changing too much out of what was a very very winning formula, and give a lot of guys reward for what they did last week would be an important way to keep the kind of good vibes going against the team we're going to have to kind of disrupt a little bit.
Yeah. I find it interesting. The AFL website has actually tipped North Melbourne to win. I'm not making any predictions right now, but then when you jump over to Wheelo ratings, that Wheelo has projected Port Adelaide to win by 14.3 points. But then when you look at the key statistics from a Wheelo point of view, so a bit more niche than the AFL website, we pipped them for a lot of metrics, attack and defense as a whole. From an attacking point of view, it's kind of split in who is better and what. North Melbourne total points, us points from turnover. But then we've got us slightly ahead on inside 50s, and scores from inside 50 we're slightly better at. We all know that we are a quite poor conversion side, so that score per inside 50 is probably a bit of a a disguise or something, for want of a better word. But then we're also much better than them from restricting score from inside 52.
Yeah.
So, and all of our defensive metrics are total points, points from turnover, points from stoppage, chain to score percentage, defensive 50 to forward 50, restricting inside 50s and restricting shots. We pip them to various degrees. So, yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned that they're a better disposal efficiency side, and perhaps that's the Clarko way. I remember Hawthorn back in the day having a lot of silky left footers, and disposal efficiency was kind of their one wood as well back in their heyday. And look, they'll be coming over here with a point to prove, trying to make it 2-0 for the season for them. But equally, like you said, it'll be on us to see how we back up from a high pressure showdown of 4 quarters of high pressure football and high energy from our from our point of view, and how we back that up. Because with a good disposal efficiency team, you do need to put pressure on the ball to restrict how proficient they are forward. But like I said in the review, their last few weeks have left a bit to be desired, even though they are on a 3-game winning run. They've only just got over the line. Some of them are 15 to 25 point wins, but then, they're over Essendon, Richmond. They got over West Coast by a point. And like I said, they got absolutely belted by Fremantle out west. So their form is a bit interesting to gauge, while still having some key players that we obviously need to pay a lot of respect to.
Yeah. I was just looking at their last actually 8 weeks I threw into my notes, and like you said, they had they've had close wins. Maybe the Richmond, they end up winning by 25 odd points, but it's not really a great game of football. Beat Essendon by 14 points, and obviously you mentioned the West Coast win by 1 point. They obviously, the trouncing by Freo. They get over the line against Gold Coast by 6 points, which more and more at the moment is looking like maybe a win over a bad team. They get absolutely pantsed by Adelaide at Adelaide Oval. Have a good battle against Sydney. Obviously, with Sydney playing away in that one back at the start of May, and they get handily beaten by Geelong. So they're at the start of May as well. So since May, they've lost against all the good teams they've come up against, and a few of them have actually gotten pantsed pretty well. Sydney being maybe the only respectable effort. And then, Gold Coast you put into the basket of bad teams at this point. They've just beaten them, West Coast, Richmond and Essendon. So whereas you look at kind of the teams we've beaten, we've beaten a couple of sides that are in the top 6, top 4, and played some pretty close ones against them as well. So our form line, percentage is such a great indicator as well. And, North Melbourne have the lowest percentage in the top 15 teams. North Melbourne's percentage is that's the lowest, just under the Western Bulldogs. whereas ours is, just touching over the hundreds. So, percentage is a good indicator of how you're going, regardless of how you're playing the games within the games. Obviously, your points total is what dictates the end of the year, and that's the most important thing. But for us and where we're looking at and how we match up against this team, and that's why Wheelo ratings is so high on us, is they have them as a defensive, defensive negative team, whereas while we're Wheelo ratings has our attack rating slightly less than theirs, our defense is almost 12 points better than theirs based on Wheelo ratings rate, or in the plus points of defense ratings in Wheelo, and North Melbourne are well below. So the overall rating has us basically more or less AFL average on Wheelo ratings, adding both attack and defense metrics up, whereas North Melbourne's overall ratings is pretty below. So as you said, their disposal efficiency and all those things are good, and maybe like a Clarko Onewood thing, but it's what they're doing with it. Their inside 50 retention rating is slightly better than ours. Ours is one of the lower in the league, and obviously we're pretty cognizant of that based on how we've been going over maybe the last 6 weeks in particular, and some of those poorer efforts. But when we get things going our way, and obviously our defensive structure holds up, and like last week we actually started getting better opportunities. We just didn't finish them, but we did start seeing a little bit more of that return to some more damaging football that we've expressed at some times this year. And you kind of just going to have to do the work against the Clarko structure. But do you see, kind of based on how we went last week, and I mean, I guess the midfield battle's a big one here, isn't it? With they've got some talented youngsters, some good veterans in there. That's kind of but with the way we've gone against a couple of the midfields we've played recently, particularly having a pretty good effort against Sydney, a pretty good effort we improved what we did against West Coast earlier in the year in the second match against West Coast. That's been one of the other teams that we've doubled up against this year. Kind of seen improvements and at Adelaide as well. Each team that we've played twice this year, we've improved on what we were able to output the previous time. So I kind of see that as this is a good battle. Obviously, Wardlaw and Sheasel, the youngsters, Uniac, LDU and Simpkin and Co across the middle there as well. It's a battle. There's some good players to contend against, but with what we've done and improved on against the repeat teams this year, I think that's a battle that we should win based on what we've seen, particularly last week. We just absolutely dominated, and I think Butters and Horne-Francis are kind of they're finally in a mood.
And it creates a headache for teams who are wanting to offer that negative shutdown role. It's who do you pick at the moment? If JHF is in the mood that he was in, good luck stopping him. And then, Butters is the obvious one historically. But I also trust, Matt, I really hope that last week's midfield performance was an anomaly because, like I said, it was a performance that we'd been waiting a long time in terms of the contributions by all. And I mean, Willem Drew played a fantastic game. Ollie Wines contributed like he did. And these are the guys that are going to help around the sides of JHF and Zach Butters. Ollie Wines, who didn't play in round one, obviously due to his suspension off the back of last year. And I mean, just before, just if I can sidebar for now, over the last month, their highest score came against Essendon last week at 79 points. And although our form has been a bit up and down and we haven't got the results we've wanted, we scored 97 points, obviously, against the Crows, 52, unfortunately, against Collingwood, although we had 22 scoring shots, 90 against Sydney, 77 in our win against West Coast. So, their scores of 79, 73, 74, and 31 over their last month. I think just by a quick look, they're having some inaccuracy issues too at the moment. So it may be, I haven't obviously watched them that closely, but it may come down to where they're getting their shots, a bit similarly to some of our constructive criticisms over the years. And then, that might be part of the midfield battle. Are they rushing their kicks in transition or out of clearance? Because from a clearance point of view, the averages across the season are just about even. We're 0.5 of a clearance on average higher than them. So this is where that midfield group are going to have to back up what they did last week. And, I desperately hope that they're up for it. And like you said, in terms of the teams that we've doubled up against, Josh Carr and the coaching team and then the players in their execution have shown that they've learnt some lessons from the last time that they played. And that's a sign of a good team, is how you can recover from your losses comparatively. I know in Richmond's heyday, for example, they made a habit of, well, not losing a lot in their dynasty. But if they did, I know particularly against Port, unfortunately, if we got them earlier in the season, they generally pipped us pipped us. They pipped us in that preliminary final in 2020 after we got them in the home and away season. So it's just about learning your lessons. And that's what, again, fills me with a bit of confidence this time around, is that we're capable of addressing some deficiencies. And in terms of that round one loss, there was some clear deficiencies. It looked like we were still playing preseason football and North Melbourne seriously came to play at home. So similarly to my sentiments with Collingwood and JHF versus Collingwood is always going to be interesting because of that pseudo number one matchup with Dacos. But then obviously, North Melbourne speaks for itself, and he'll always want to prove his worth, I guess you can say. That's probably laying it on a bit too thick, but I think forever and a day we can expect JHF to want to get up and prove, or just establish dominance against this team and make it known that he made the right decision to leave. So that's, if you needed a carrot, that's probably just from an individual point of view, coming off the back of a showdown and with the whole showdown letdown looming, or the question mark looming. It's a good motivator for him in particular. But like I said, the peripheral players such as Ollie Wines and Willem Drew will also have their tasks to do, because Sheasel has been on a bit of a tear as of late, racking up disposals. And we all know what George Wardlaw can do in the middle. Tristan Cherry is an interesting one because he's kind of been shifted out of centre bounce and more used around the ground, which is a change from our round one game where he was basically the sole ruck, and Visentini did perform well from a CBA point of view, but it was once it got around the ground that North Melbourne seriously gained ascendancy over us. And that's where Jordan Sweet is the man in the seat now. Sweet in the seat. And I'm really looking forward to see how he performs both against Cherry, and I think Trembath has been maybe taking some centre bounces. I have a feeling they brought in someone else, but I can't. I probably can't pad for long enough to figure out who it was. I remember hearing discussions on your Saturday rubs and your Sunday rubs and things like that about just their situation in terms of their ruck, and obviously Kane Corns has brought up Cherry and how North Melbourne would like to move him on, which I think is a bit rich, but it sets up an intriguing battle from ruck to rover, and then how they benefit from clearance on our side and their side.
Yeah. I am really interested in the Sweet and Cherry battle. Obviously, Cherry's just coming back in after a couple of weeks off, I think, with a fractured jaw out of one of their recent games, probably one of their recent wins. I think he's only been out for a couple of weeks, but he did have a fractured jaw. So that's an interesting one, just purely for a ruck battle, is to go in with a fracture, coming off a fractured jaw. I assume it's not that big a deal, but for Cherry, Sweet to keep it physical and make him work for it. And I think Sweet's just in the form of his life at the moment. Obviously, I still hope it keeps getting better, and he keeps improving. But I think I've said it a few times over the past month that he, after a couple of years of obviously winning the job over Soldo through maybe some fortune with Soldo going down, and then obviously with Vicentini coming through over the last 18 months as well, he's kind of had to fight for his position there a little bit. And I think now, the way he's playing, it's like he's both taken on the challenge of winning the job, and then he's now believing that it doesn't matter who he comes up against. Obviously, He's made some pretty good ruckman look. Either just his eagle, like, Brodie Grundy was a great matchup. Obviously, Brodie Grundy still gets his wins on the day, but you look at Sweet and just don't say he was soundly beaten. And, big Stretch McAndrew from the Crows has been one of the talked about finds of the year. And he absolutely kind of gave him a bath last week. So he's kind of been, he's been getting better. And the mids, we've been seeing the mids work better out of that because there's a little bit more pattern forming in what we're doing in the midfield work. And one quick one, you did say Shees was getting a lot of the ball. Do we try to put the clamps on him a little bit or something like that to try to just curb his influence? Because he is one of those just kind of, he does look like he's going to be one of those players like a Dacos that can just accumulate. How well he uses it and the effectiveness of that ball use goes down to how the team moves the ball, but just purely based on his influence alone, he's kind of one of those ball winners.
Yeah, look, it's a really interesting question because obviously there's the LDU factor as well, who I probably rate as their bigger threat at the moment, just through experience and. Yeah, I think so too. I think Sheasel has benefited from the opponents that they have played, and that's not necessarily to take away from him, but and Essendon doesn't have a serious negating aspect to their midfield. Richmond, we all know their woes at the moment. And who was the other? West Coast as well. They're more wanting to kind of go one-on-one with their midfield setup as well. So Sheasels probably benefited from a bit more open play. I think just from memory, I think what good teams have shown is if you can put him under pressure, consistent pressure, that maybe he can take a lot more safer options with his disposal, which may not necessarily be forward. It may be sideways and backwards, which I'm not unhappy with. If it means meters neutral or meters negative rather than meters gained, then I can cop that.
It works. It works fantastic for how we set up. That's what we want. We want teams trying to
we'll set up our zone.
Just like, we'll wait for you to take a chance, and we're set up behind.
Look, not to be a broken record with these type of things, but Willem Drew. It may be a wait and see because it took until the second half for Willem Drew to go to Dawson. Port were pretty happy with how things were going, but it was as if at halftime they're like, all right, we can kind of put a nail in the coffin, so to speak, if we just take out their absolute best player who was performing fairly well in the first half of the Adelaide Crows. And then Drew went to him and quelled his influence. Again, Drew's clearance in that first quarter, fucking sensational. And I want more of that from Willem Drew. So do we go a hard tag? I don't think they will. I think they will rely on team pressure, but it's obviously nice to know that if we need to pull that trigger, we can put the clamps down. Obviously, we haven't spoken about Joe Richards and his contributions, obviously not playing as a midfielder in that round one team. So again, as Josh Carr has said in his press conference, we've made some changes since that game and they've made some changes to their game as well. So it's going to be interesting from a mix point of view because Joe Rich is very good on the ground, very good from a contested possession point of view and a decision-making point of view. But I think it might be a wait and see from a clamps. Got to get my clamps. Futurama reference there for people who indulge in that. Just one more thing before I hand back to you. Dylan Stephens had probably his career best game against us in round one. I don't want to fucking see that again. And now he's listed on a wing for them. And it'll be interesting to see, him and Simpkin are on wings from the team sheet. And then we've got Jace Burgoyne and Jack Lukosius. So it'll be interesting to see who gains ascendancy, who's, the push and pull of the defense and the attack wing. But I don't want to fucking see Dylan Stephens with the amount of space that he fucking had, albeit being a winger. Cut that out.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. As soon as you said his name, I was like, oh, God, he had he had 25, 30, and I think he had a couple of goals and doing all sorts. I just don't think the way that we set up now will allow that nearly as well. So thinking back to that game, we looked a little bit on our heels, a little bit unsure of ourselves. There was a lot of things going on that showed us as a first game under a new coach and being thrown into the cauldron of, an up and coming team in an away game. It felt like there was a lot of things that kind of just, the lights kind of got to us a little bit. Whereas that just, we've seen from multiple games this year, whether they be wins or losses against good teams, that we stand up under pressure. It may be our disposal efficiency, but I don't think that's a pressure thing getting out. That's just we don't make we're a young team making bad decisions at times, and that's going to be the push and pull of this one is our ball use, where obviously our disposal to clanger ratio is one of the worst in the competition, and the Kangaroos again. But I think the Kangaroos is partly, as you said, there's a lot of disposals that are going to low risk opportunities. So I think our kick threat rating is one of the top 3 in the league. So there is something to how we play versus how North Melbourne is one of the worst. So despite their disposal efficiency on Wheelo ratings, the kick threat rating, I think we're one of the better ones in the competition. So that does speak to some of the things that we're doing and trying to do and how we're trying to play. That does affect those disposal efficiency numbers. So if we can mitigate those gaps where they're better, and then keep whilst also playing our game, then those will be like, if we can bridge those gaps a little bit. I don't expect us to beat them, as I said at the top of the show, but there's areas if we can play the game in our way. Because last week against the Crows, we didn't have better disposal efficiency. There were some areas that were a bit worse than them, but it didn't matter because our threat rating was probably better in that one as well, and that led to us having 32 scoring shots to 16. And if we can do something similar in this one, then we're going to be a long way to win. There is threats at both ends. I think defensively, they're gettable. Obviously, they've got some good veterans down there. Charlie Comben plays well as well. Caleb Daniel and Luke Parker, I think they're 2 top-rated defenders. So that goes to show that the veterans they've brought in are what are kind of holding up their structure and a little bit of what they're doing. Luke Parker was, I was swearing at him the amount of times he was getting an intercept mark against us and a few last time we played him. So and I think I remember watching him when we were at the gather round game in Lyndoch.
Yeah,
Luke Parker was taking some
had a good game,
big intercept marks against Brisbane in that one as well. So, but we showed last week against the Crows that we can actually play around that and actually take a fairly good advantage of the way we structured up in the forward contests. Obviously, we didn't finish we took a decent amount of marks inside 50, didn't finish from enough of them, but at least we were able to make it work at ground level. Obviously, Durden. Joe Berry coming into his own. Shout out to Travis Wakeling putting
small
up
forwards.
That he's one of the top 15 rated small forwards in the competition since round 9, I think. Yeah, Joe Berry. So Corey Durden obviously doing some fantastic things as well, and finally getting AFL recognition. So our forward kind of mix, if we can do similar to what we did last week and bring either get finish better from the set shots, number one, would be great. I'm going to keep saying that every week. That's going to be because we're getting the marks inside 50. We're just one of the better teams for that. We're just not getting the reward from it. From basically where we're taking the kicks from a lot is the issue as well. But if our small forwards who are in form can at least work out the ball coming out of contest, and Mitch Georgiades is starting to get more shots from general play because he's getting involved in that as well. So he got a fair bit of his scoring fun last week from that. So the forward line, I think, can have some joy against this one. I'm throwing 2 things at you just for the brevity of time. But forward line, I'd be interested to see your thoughts there. And then obviously the battle for our defenders against their forward line is probably my biggest intrigue in this one with, Zerk Thatcher getting another shot as well. So
yeah, obviously Caleb Daniel, I think him and Sheasel both had like 40 disposals or something last week. I should have checked that. Yeah, and again,
possibly that might be why
they played Essendon, only beaten them by 14 points, which I think is still pretty relevant to consider. But Charlie Comben is a trier. He will compete until the cows come home. Aiden Core, I think, has had an improved month to 6 weeks. However, and then they've brought back in Griffin Logue, who's actually listed on the interchange bench from the extended squads. Pretty solid contributors if the team is on top, but you Griffin Logues of the world can tend to drop their head a little bit if the flow of the game is going against them and can potentially be exposed from players making leads and running patterns are going quite well. But, they've kind of tried to shore that end up with a bit of experience in that regard with your Griffin Lloyd, Aiden Core, and like you said, Luke Parker, Caleb Daniel. It's all going to come down to pressure. And with our selections for the showdown, there was a clear ethos type selection made or solidifying of the team. So it's going to come down to your Bammets, Durdens, Joe Berries, Richards when he's resting up forward, Mitch Sado if he does stay in the team, and the likes of Mitch Georgiadis and whatnot to just be putting that immense pressure on. Again, Vizentini was selected for his contest outside of second ruck duties, was selected for his contest in the air, which is going to be vital as well if we're going to try and try and mark inside 50, but if we're not bringing those small forwards into play because they feasted last week through our contest. And something that I didn't bring up in our review was just the game of Jack Whitlock from a contest point of view, both up the ground and in the forward 50. It was a real evolution, I think. We've been kind of crying out when we're exiting defensive 50 to kind of get that contest. And, I think there was one week we're just like, bring back Charlie Dixon. We just want that get out kick. But on the weekend in the showdown, there was quite a number of times where Jordan Sweet and Jack Whitlock were kind of pairing up to get that ball to ground on a wing. But then as well as that, when Jack Whitlock was up forward, he was involved in many chains to score through his contest in the air, not necessarily marking it contested, but bringing it to ground, hassling on the ground as well. I'm pretty sure Mitch's second goal came from Jack Whitlock squabbling for the ball and palming the ball out for George to snap. So in terms of these players on North Melbourne side who like to kind of get that easy, fluent ball rebounding out of their backline, Colby McKercher probably falls into that as well. If our forward line is drilled like they should be and like they were last week, it could mean that our time in forward half maybe generates us a bit more score, because we are, funnily enough, in terms of what we do with the ball, time in forward half is actually one of the outliers in a good way for us. All of our other kind of with the ball attacking stats in relation to the competition are fairly average, 11s to 15ths kind of thing. But time in forward half, I think we were 6th after the last round of football. And which just goes to show we're doing a bit right. And obviously that is from the centre line forward. But we're doing a lot right in terms of our possession in our forward half. It's just we haven't been able to convert that to score or goals as much as we would have liked. So that's where that forward pressure is going to be critical when it comes to the likes of those rebounders who can be deficient when put under pressure. Like Caleb Daniel is a good disposer of the ball, but has also shown that under immense pressure can make a few silly decisions or try and bite off more than he can chew. So I'm looking forward to see. What was that?
Do you want some crazy stats there? Some crazy stats out of last week's game. While you're on Caleb Daniel and co, Sheasel's 43 disposals were at 93% efficiency. Caleb Daniel's 40 were at 97.5, and Luke Parker's 31 are at 93.5. So they've all had 30 plus and gone over. There's a couple of them 40 plus and gone over.
I just can't see that happening.
90 and 97. And that's my point, and throw back to you. But I wanted to bring that up and say to you, that's just can't happen against us, can it? If we
it's
play,
like when you play the player side and they have that rare conversion week. Like one game that springs to mind was that St Kilda game during COVID where they came to Adelaide Oval. It's one of our only losses for the year, but they just had a stupid goal kicking night where they just couldn't miss. Yeah. And you're like, what this isn't sustainable. Those stats that you just read out kind of have that ringing in my ear. Like that's not sustainable. And again, Essendon probably aren't putting on the greatest of pressure and aren't manning up the way they should be or setting up a zone, which helps that disposal efficiency. I just can't see us, if we're drilled the way that we think we will be or should be, we're bringing that disposal efficiency down at least 10 to 15%.
Mm-hmm. It has to, and I can't see how that would work. I'm flying through Wheeler ratings to try to find that Port versus St Kilda game.
Right. Well, I'll jump onto our defensive end. Obviously, I heard a rumor, I think it was yesterday or whatnot, about Jack Darling being a late out. So watch this space, but he's listed, and I think it might just be someone talking shit, but take it on face value. Their forward line is full of goals in terms of Jack Darling, Nick Larkey, Cameron Zurhaar, all consistent goal kickers across their AFL journeys. And then Cooper Trembath, who's someone that the league, but also Arson, you mentioned that Barossa game, very impressed with his kind of emergence at AFL level. So someone we're definitely going to have to pay respect to, and it's going to be interesting how we match up. We mentioned that Adelaide only tended to play two of their tall forwards in their forward line at any one time. Could North Melbourne take a leaf out of that book from a learning point of view and maybe try and stretch us in the air and play all three? Because, we're relying on Alir, Zerk Thatcher from our genuine key position players, but then relying on Bergman to play taller, Lockie Jones to play taller, Logan Evans to play taller, to take that third key position forward for North Melbourne if they do try and stretch us. Not to harp on about pressure, but another reason why, outside of Darcy Fogarty, that Thilthorpe and Tex didn't really have great games was the pressure on the football. If we're getting dump kicks, we're getting high kicks and allowing our defenders to assist in the air, that's where we can negate that threat. And then from a ground point of view, I mean, Zurhaar's probably your mid, kind of good in the air, good at ground level type of thing. They've got Finn O'Sullivan on a half forward flank. Yeah, that's a great point too. No Paul Curtis, he's still serving a suspension. As that's correct. Yeah, but they've got a Charlie Spargo.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, similar conjecture too to Paul Curtis suspension. But Charlie Spargo, a premiership player for Melbourne, obviously. Zane Dersma will be nipping at the heels. So, but in terms of our defence, I mean, in terms of Josh Lai, I don't want to heap too much expectation on him. I don't expect him to have another career game immediately after having one in a big game. But the likes of Darcy Byrne-Jones and, like we were saying, Lockie Jones, Logan Evans, they all had low disposal games because it was a good shift at work for them. They had to just keep their noses clean, but they weren't required to kind of perform above themselves. Whereas if required, we know that they can, and they won't be having to kind of back up huge performances from the week before. So DBJ, we know, can get his hands on the pill and apply pressure. Lockie Jones can steamroll. See you next Tuesdays. Logan Evans is playing with that edge, like we said, and it'll be interesting to see how Miles Bergman reintegrates and how he returns from injury, but not expecting miracles from him either. Yeah, wins tend to get your spirits up, and, I'm wary of being overconfident. But that performance was pretty stirring in the showdown. And, whether that's a moment where we click and the team as a whole, again, buys back into that 23-man unit, although our top end is still pretty good with the likes of Horne-Francis, Butters, Ollie Wines, Alir, Mitch Georgiades, like you said, Berry being the 15th best small forward since the first showdown, Durden in career best form. There's match winners in each line. It's just the synergy between the three and reacting, or not necessarily reacting to everything that North Melbourne does, but just being proactive in our own right and just making smart decisions if North Melbourne throw a few punches at us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and ultimately, I think just we saw how important it is if you can get clear domination from the center and just and win the territory battle, then that's really a key. And if we can get be on the plus side of that, even if it's not as big a domination this week, that'll go a long way. And then from there, it's just if North Melbourne have their moments, we're just going to have to, keep trying to improve on that rebound 50 and a transition number, because that's probably one of our worst areas this year so far. But we saw last week that if you don't have to do that as much, then it helps as well. But do need to work on all those areas. But there's reasons to be optimistic, and I particularly think if we can win some clearance and get the ball inside our forward 50 and our forward half and hold, get some time down there, then that defense will be gettable enough.
I think Lukosius also plays a part in that, and I'm very intrigued to see another full game from Jack. Fingers crossed, touching wood. True. All of the good lucky charms that he plays another full game, because his disposal inside 50 is critical to where we're getting shots from. Because he doesn't. Usually, you're wanting to get that kick into the. Was it Adam Simpson calls it the launch zone, which is about between 50 and 65 meters or 70 meters out from goal to then get deep entries. Jack Lukosius can kick from a genuine wing and get it into the corridor inside 50, which, even if you're 45 meters out directly in front, still is a fairly good percentage shot. But not only that, he can get you inside 30 meters from a wing. So holds the key. Obviously, he needs to keep his nose clean in terms of his opponent on the wing. But potential game changer in regards to where we're taking shots from or collecting crumbs from, as we saw with the small forwards in the showdown.
I was going to say there's two parts of that. It's either he's getting balls in that are markable in good areas, or just it was talked about in their telecasts last week, and I think talked about in their review as well, that the penetration and just the style of kick he has is it travels through the air faster, it's more penetrating, and it's going to create some chaos. Even though it's not a chaos ball, it's a very, very good kick, but the way it comes in is going to be more challenging for a defense, and not in turn, if it's a defense contesting it, brings it to ground. Boys light up, or obviously, hopefully, someone gets space on the lead and marks it on the chest as well. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good way.
I like Wheelo
to wrap it up. What's your prediction?
I like Wheelo's prediction. I think, again, without getting overly ahead of ourselves after one stirring win, and I am, kind of concerned about a showdown hangover. But I think 14 points is not out of the realms of possibility at all. Obviously, they do the metrics. But I think, if we can match our pressure, our teamwork, because it's off the ball stuff as well. It's stuff that doesn't gain statistics. That if you watch that game again against the Crows, it's gang tackling, it's shepherding, it's smothers, it's that effort stuff. Those do get your stats. If we match our output from a team first point of view, then I absolutely see us winning at home. And again, with the fact that we've learnt from our mistakes in our other double ups, I think fills me with confidence as well coming into this game. Josh Carr would probably be feeling, or not feeling now, embarrassed, but probably would have been pretty embarrassed with how round one went. So that's probably, and getting us up for a showdown, he's showed he's capable of rallying the troops from that point of view. Not that we were really questioning that, but we want our own back. So I think 14 points is pretty realistic outcome at home for us on a day that is looking pretty good for footy. Yeah.
No, the weather forecast is going 15 degrees, and all this weather that we're dealing with in the last couple of days is kind of petering out, I think, tomorrow and into the weekend. So hopefully it's looking pretty good for Sunday afternoon twilight footy. Will be chilly, I think, once that sun sets, so prepare for that. But otherwise, good winter conditions for footy. Yeah, I'm probably in a pretty similar vein. The Willow ratings stands true to me. I think we can win by 4 or 5 goals.
Pedal to the metal.
Have a rare night of, or more. Yeah, and a rare night of good conversion. We've seen our X score has been, we've been, under the line most of the weeks that we're playing with X score, and the X score ladder says we probably should have 3 or 4 more wins, I think, this year, which is how severe that underselling of that has been. So, but otherwise, I think if it goes kind of similar to how we've been going, where our conversion's a bit wayward, but we're still getting the opportunities at 14, 15 points that Wheelo's on is a fairly good area. I don't think we're a team that can beat the brakes off a side. Essendon aside earlier in the year, but then injuries have come in and have kind of just stepped down our level, but the structure is holding us true. And that's why we're staying in these games and getting wins like we did last week. But I think, that Wheeler ratings one is probably pretty true. But I do kind of have like my eye on maybe it would be nice to have that kind of 4 or 5 goal, nice kind of win that we look at like last week, where we were pretty comfortable most of the day. It wasn't a crazy score, but we were comfortable and we looked like we were going to win all day. That would be a nice kind of result to back up the Showdown result, which had a pretty similar feel to it, apart from obviously the standard Showdown anxieties. As we close off, I wanted to bring up one thing. How chuffed were you to see that story that I think David Kosh brought up on 5AA Breakfast about Josh Carr bringing in one of your favourite parts of Ted Lasso into the team talk last week leading into the Showdown? Of course, I reference, if you haven't seen Ted Lasso, there's a dart scene where Ted Lasso is being beaten by the
owner of
the
show,
football
team, or the ex-owner of the football team.
Yeah.
Who sadly the actor passed away recently, just on a tangent.
And Ted,
but
yes, yeah, and he played the role very, very well, and a long-term actor, of course, as well. But essentially, Ted then starts to come back and has a brilliant comeback in the darts and beats him, and goes on a monologue referencing that. His if you're curious of me, I'm paraphrasing, but if you're curious of who I was rather than judgmental of me, you would have learnt that I used to spend all my time in bars with my dad, and I played darts all my life. And as Jamie, I'll throw over to you.
Be
Jamie,
curious, not judgmental. Well. And thanks to Dave for getting that from his trips into the UK earlier this year.
Yeah, that was literally from
great
Richmond,
show, Ted Lasso.
So I just wanted to see how you felt about that, because I thought that was it is a very, very. We've talked about it on this podcast before. You've brought it up and how much that kind of idea means to you and your general life ethos. But I think it's very, very important to it's really.
I mean, he could have referenced anything in Ted Lasso, and I would have been happy with it, because there are a lot of heartwarming and stirring themes throughout that whole show. Underdog type stuff,
or just that they like poop.
It's poop. Yeah, but be curious, not judgmental. Like you said, pretty big life ethos of mine. And then that scene in Ted Lasso always kind of stirs something in me. I love watching that scene. Obviously, Fox's the guy using his wrong hand at first with darts, and then switches hands and nails it. But I think it goes without saying, my thoughts to you, but to everyone else, fucking awesome. Do more of that, please. That'd be great.
Yeah. We need to find out who the Denny Rojas of Port Adelaide is now. Like, who is the player at training that's just sprinting out of the locker room?
Well, I think
football is life.
A theme of his is that he can't convert from the penalty spot. So maybe it's Mitch Georgiadis who can't convert from his set shots.
Hey, Mitch is a quirky one, so I could, we could go with that. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. We could just do another hour on that, but this is the preview show, and we don't do that. We don't go that long. So we're about to tick close to an hour. So we should wrap it up. But yeah, looking forward to the game this weekend. It's always nice it's a rare opportunity to go to Adelaide Oval off the back of a win as winners and walk in there and hope for another one. So looking forward to it. As always, a shout out to everyone if you're heading down there and want to say good day for a beer.
Sure
we'll
will.
be floating around, I'm sure. So somewhere inside the Oval or wherever get in touch with us if you want to. So, or if you just see us, say hello. A fair few of the people that have caught up with us this year, it has seriously just been through just running into us. So, we're happy to say hello if you do. So, thank you all.
And as always, calm the pair.